Hello, White Sox fans, and welcome into another edition of the Sox On Tap podcast. It's Tony Marchese alongside NWI Steve. Rumor has it we're in the best shape of our lives, Steven. Is that hashtag confirmed?
I've reached out to multiple sources to get this confirmed here. It is hashtag unconfirmed at the moment here. I can just say that I'm putting in the work so that when I report to Glendale in about 6 weeks or so here, that I'm
late
looking,
spring training for you, huh?
Well, I'm getting there mid-March, but I'm putting in the work so that I show up in the best shape of my life.
That's fantastic. There's a lot of other people out there right now getting themselves in spring training form. We'll talk a little bit about that. Before we do, be sure you're following the show at Sox On Tap on Twitter. Follow the number one best shape of their life guy, NWI Steve, at NWI_Steve. Myself.
Yeah, that's hashtag unconfirmed, Anthony.
Well, we're working on it. You can follow myself at Tony On Tap. Make sure you're getting on the YouTube so you can drop in these comments. We did have Twitter comments, X comments, whatever you want to call them these days, last week on the show. That was a new thing for us. So you can comment on X as well now, and welcome on in. We've got quite a few topics to talk about, Steve. Before we do, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well, Anthony. It's we're another day closer to baseball season here. Fortunately, that silly foosball nonsense will be over in short order. And
getting close, Super Bowl time.
Yeah, we're hashtag blessed to know that crap is no longer going to be polluting the airwaves.
Yeah, it's getting closer and closer to spring training every day. We got about 15 days, I think it is now, until pitchers and catchers report. Just over 2 weeks. Once we turn that calendar over to February, it's baseball month. So that's good news. It's positive news. I'm feeling good about it myself. Couple things on our agenda today. We're going to look at some of the stadium developments that have transpired since we last spoke last week. We got some comments from some pretty important people in the baseball universe on that. We'll look at some Dylan C stuff. We'll talk a little bit about the Zips projections that we didn't have a chance to get into last week. Those are going to be such a fun topic. It's going to be riveting conversation. And we'll look a little bit at the Baseball America Top 100 that just came out. A couple of White Sox names on there. So let's start it off right at the top here, Steven. New stadium developments. This thing, we talked a lot about it last week. Went in depth on it. You've gone in depth on it a couple times over at ontapsportsnet.com. So if you are looking for some extra reading material out there, head on over on ontapsportsnet.com, head to the White Sox section, and you can find all of Steven's wonderful work up there. Steve, what do we got here? What has transpired in the past 6 days?
Well, something real big that happened yesterday was that Commissioner Rob Manfred got his eyes on the plans and the tentative idea behind the stadium. And he has also now given a thumbs up. Hashtag praise Manfred.
That's a big development here. A huge development. I believe he called it game-changing stadium plans. That's not something that I've heard come out of Rob Manfred's mouth since he talked about the pitch clock and bigger bases. So game-changing developments with this new stadium. Stephen, I saw some other things in the news about some doubters that are out there that this is going to actually happen as fast as I think you have alluded to it taking place in your work here. But any thoughts on what this Manfred stamp of approval is going to mean for this new stadium development?
I think if you just look at the key power players here involved in this, now you add Commissioner Manfred, hashtag praise Manfred, to the list here. You've got him. You've got Mayor Johnson giving positive endorsement of the plan so far without really digging into a lot of the specifics. You have the president of the Chicago Federation of Labor. These are all things that I talked about in my most recent piece over at ontapsportsnet.com. Those are some pretty significant names to have in there. And, kind of one of the central points of my piece is that it seems as though Jerry Reinsdorf and, the development company behind the 78 project here are really lining up all the chess pieces that they have here before going down to Springfield to have the conversation with Governor J.B. Pritzker, who has been very adamant that no public funding be used for the funding of any new stadium here. We've seen it thrown around a couple of times by various people out there that there's going to be no new taxes to it, and kind of the implication, and this is something even going back to what Bruce Levine had reported 7 to 10 days ago, was that the tax ramifications would be identical to what they are currently with the Sox stadium deal. Now, I think the governor might have a little bit of pushback on that here, wanting to decrease that tax exposure to the tax base, and I think understandably so. But I think anytime that you have a negotiation of this magnitude here, you're not going to go in and you're not going to make your best offer right out of the chute here. So I think the White Sox and the development company here involved in the overall 78 project are coming in here, making their initial offer, and knowing that, hey, maybe we've got some room to work here and some room to work down when it comes to the funding mechanism side of this equation here. So again, there are still a lot of things that can happen here, and I don't want there to be a misunderstanding about this here. I'm not trying to imply that I think that this thing is definitely going to happen, or even placing it as probable right now. All I'm simply trying to say here with the information that we have to this point is that there is momentum building towards it. A lot of things can still go wrong here with that, but the fact that there is this much positive momentum this early on in the process, I think, is a positive sign that something could get done here.
Yeah, I mean, when you've got the commissioner of baseball involved, you've already talked to the mayor. There's been a lot of smoke, and normally when there's smoke, there's a fire that's causing that smoke. So you've been all over this thing since day zero. We'll keep checking back in for developments on the 78 project as this thing rolls along. I think you had predicted a potential 2027, 2028 date. I think that's ahead of what a lot of people have originally thought as the opening of a potential new stadium here. But you provided some pretty good evidence. I implore everybody to go check out sooner rather than later the title of your article over at On Tap Sportsnet if they want to read more on that. Steve, we had some news break in the actual baseball front of things with the White Sox, and that was via Bob Nightingale's Sunday column, and he mentions that the White Sox and the Seattle Mariners have been engaging in trade talks around one Dylan Cease. Now, these things cooled off completely to the point where you had Pedro Grifol speaking last week, right before the season ticket holder event, that he's going to be the opening day starter. I think that's fairly common knowledge. If he's on this team still, he is your number one starter. But also that the Sox were prepared to head into this season retaining Dylan Cease and potentially trying to make a move at the deadline. The Mariners, not a team that has been mentioned much of at all in Dylan Cease sweepstakes up until this point, are now in the conversation. It's Tuesday night. We had this break, I guess, on Sunday. Where do you think these talks are at?
Well, okay, a couple things here. First, I mean, Pedro Grifol's comments, I mean, kind of what's he really supposed to say?
Right.
He's not going to come out and say, well, we're not expecting him to be here when we break camp from Arizona. I mean, that's kind of just a very generic manager speak right there, which, that's kind of the one thing he's decently good at, I guess I would say. As far as the situation with Seattle here, Jerry DiPoto loves making trades. I mean, I think he wakes up in the middle of the night trying to contemplate a deal to make. I think the saddest day on the calendar for him is trade deadline day, because he knows that he can't really do anything after that. So it's a very somber day for DiPoto. He loves wheeling and dealing. it is kind of interesting to see them get thrown around a little bit in these discussions here. You're right. They're not a team that has been talked about very much over the course of the winter here. They've got a pretty robust farm system. Now that has taken a little bit of a hit here in the last 24 hours after their acquisition of former Minnesota Twins second baseman and Sox killer Jorge Polanco. The fact that Jorge Polanco was able to get 4 players in a deal, including a top 100 prospect and another player right on the cusp of it, is really fascinating to me. And I think that speaks to some of the reports out there from Bob and some of the other people that the Sox are looking for a king's ransom for
The
Dylan
sun and the
Cease.
moon, I believe, was that John Heyman.
John Heyman, yeah. And like I said, if Jorge Polanco is getting that much, I mean, justifiably, the Sox should be looking to get that kind of return for Dylan Cease. When you realize that, Blake Snell is out there still thinking he's going to get $200 million, even though it doesn't appear as though he has offers out there. Jordan Montgomery is going to get over $100 million.
There's still names out there on this market.
There are still names out there, but I mean, at the end of the day, I think a team like Jerry DiPoto and someone and an executive like him kind of looks at this as prospects are currency, and you can use that to get an asset like a Dylan Cease, something that's not going to cost you 9 figures.
And, I don't mean to go bringing back up the Chicago White Sox failed rebuild 2.0, but I feel like it's going to happen probably at least 200 times this season. It's funny that we say this and we sit here right now and we advocate for other teams to maybe act in that manner when a lot of people in White Sox camp were saying, hey, it's just money. We don't need to trade all of these prospects that we hoarded. You could sort of throw the Dane Dunning, Lance Lynn trade into that equation. I think Rick Hahn did a fair job. We've evaluated that thing to the ends of the earth already. But it's just funny. Like, we want them to go and give up all of this prospect capital for Dylan Cease when a couple of years ago we were in this situation and it was just go out and sign this free agent for $100 million. Don't make that trade. Don't trade Andrew Vaughn or some of these other names that were out there. It's interesting juxtaposition.
Well, I think in a sense, I mean, if you look at the way that the Mariners have built their team, I mean, they did go out and they signed, Robbie Ray to a 9-figure deal fresh off of a Cy Young award that he won with the Toronto Blue Jays. Now, they subsequently traded him to the San Francisco Giants here. So they've done that. They gave Julio Rodriguez a $200 million extension. So they've kind of done some of the spending aspect of it. Again, I think it's just a little bit of a different situation because Jerry DiPoto loves to make trades. That is just in his nature and just part of his general composition. I mean, he loves to make a deal. So that's where.
Do you think something gets done? What's your inkling? Because there's been the camp that says, and I believe Bruce Levine said this on Sunday as well on 670 The Score, there's no way they walk into camp with Dylan Cease, risk injury. But then you've got Bob Nightingale's qualifier at the end of his little snippet on Dylan Cease. And if the White Sox are unable to strike a deal with Seattle, they're prepared to go into the season with him. I don't know if that means they're going to shut down any further talk, or if that means, we're just sort of, positioning ourselves for another bidder to enter at this point. But it's been relatively quiet outside the Mariners. Do you think we get something done here?
I think it's a coin flip right now. I know that's a little bit of a cop-out right here, but like you said, pitchers and catchers report in 2 weeks, and we've actually kind of seen this, I would say, over the last 2 or 3 years. It feels as though the spring training pitcher injuries have kind of had an uptick in their frequency. And, this is stuff that happens sometimes right away that first week. I mean, I remember 2011, Adam Wainwright blowing his elbow out after his first bullpen session. So these things do happen, and you always have injuries during the course of spring training. And so you never really know what's going to happen with any of the teams that are out there that are serious contenders. And, it's not that you're sitting here hoping for an injury to take place, but they are just simply a reality. And, that is the type of thing that could force desperation out of a team and kind of give them that nudge that they need to make a deal. So if it were me, I would not take the risk of going into the season with Dylan Cease on the roster, just because if we've learned anything over the course of the last 6 years, it's that if the White Sox didn't have bad luck, they wouldn't have any luck at all.
Are we sure we've learned that? Do we need further proof?
I mean, I feel like that's been hashtag confirmed.
Yeah, fairly confirmed. Steve, I'm of the mindset that there probably will be a deal that gets done. That's just my inkling. My gut feeling is that whether or not it's prior to spring training or within the first week, I think we see something get done here. Don't know if I'm exactly comfortable with that being the case because of what we're about to talk about right now with these new White Sox Zips projections. And yes, it's that time to get there. We've got some effects here as well. We're going to add up the Zips projections to the stage. Steven, you've done a little bit of digging in on this. Here we go. What is this? And there are names on here that I have never seen before.
I'm going to be honest with you. It's bad. It's bad. Okay. It's bad. Basically you've got Luis Jr. and a whole bunch of garbage. On the positional side, look, you're projecting Luis Robert Jr. as a 4-win player again, but even seeing a downtick in his production from a year ago, the model actually has him, with a 119 WRC plus, that's down 9 points from a year ago. Hitting 28 homers when he was 38 a year ago. And really the biggest variance with him that they're showing is a decline in the slugging percentage. He slugged 542 a year ago. It's showing him at 496 this year. So, that would be a notable drop off right there. If that were to take place, you go around the rest of the diamond there. I mean, Yoan Moncada, they're projecting a basic Yoan Moncada year, 252, 325, 411, 102 WRC plus, so just slightly above league average.
Is that the career year that everybody's looking for?
No, we had the career year with the super bouncy ball. That was in 2019.
He's motivated now, though.
That's fine, but we know what he is at this point.
But I'm very curious to see what a very motivated Yoan Moncada looks like this season.
Haven't we heard this story before? I feel like the motivated Yoan Moncada and the off-season videos of him hitting in the tee, those are those are the original, Justin Fields running on the treadmill after, having 102 passing yards and a loss, I feel like that was kind of the precursor and the original right there. But we know what Yoan Moncada is at this point. If somehow he does have that horseshoe up his ass this year and hits 20 homers, cool. Great. Maybe you pick up a little bit of the freight and maybe a team, needs help at third base down the stretch, and maybe you can get rid of him 2 months early. That'd be cool.
So you're predicting right now a Yoan Moncada trade deadline flip?
I'm not predicting that. No, I'm not. I'm predicting just more of the same of what we've seen from him, of just, very average, borderline underwhelming. If they get more out of him, cool. And then maybe you can move him if you pick up some of the freight on that $25 million, but I'm not projecting that by any means.
Give some people some hope here, Steven.
They came to the wrong place.
Man, tough Zips crowd.
They came to the wrong place. Yeah, I think that maybe the anthem for the 2024 for the fan base this year should be Slipknot's 2008 classic "All Hope Is Gone." I think that's probably more apropos.
Let's just keep it moving here. We've talked a little Moncada. I think we're ready to keep moving on here. He was motivated, and you're trying to take him down a notch.
Yeah,
very much like you, Steven.
Well, what are you going to do? I mean, it's got Eloy, 280, 332, 473. So a little bit better on the slug, 21 homers, 119 WRC plus. Those are okay numbers, right there. I mean, for a guy that's not going to give you anything defensively or on the base paths, still not enough for me.
They have him listed here in right field with our boy Oscar Colas and my son. So, I think he sees some time out there in right field this year.
I mean,
it's not going to be what I want to see.
I don't think anybody wants to see that, if we're being completely honest with ourselves here. But that is what it is.
Let's keep looking at this train wreck.
Noodle Boy. Let's talk about Noodle Boy.
He's put on some weight. So I don't even know if you can call him Noodle Boy anymore. He was eating all off season.
Well, Zips has him projected for a 401 slug. So yes, I can call him Noodle Boy still. That's very noodle-like. 10 home runs and a 105 WRC plus. That's no thanks, Noodle Boy. Get lost, and we'll have 3 more years of this garbage after this.
Highest paid player in White Sox history, and Steve's still unhappy with him
because he stinks.
Keep it moving.
He stinks. Andrew Vaughn, a very hotly debated and widely panned individual on this team, kind of getting very similar numbers to a year ago. 263, 327, 453 with 24 homers and a 113 WRC plus. That 453 would actually be a pretty substantial improvement for him. But again, in my baseball world, if you are a right bat only first baseman and you're slugging 453, that's just not enough for me. That's a problem. So, 24 home runs out of him. I mean, he hit 21 a year ago. There's just not enough there. Let's just be real about this. There hasn't been development from him. I mean, he's had 1,600 career plate appearances. He's just not good enough. That's why I would have been totally cool with the Sox bringing in Rhys Hoskins and putting him at first base and just being done with Andrew Vaughn. I don't need to see Andrew Vaughn anymore. I'm over it.
You are a beacon of hope for everyone right now. And we've got Kenwo here with the comment. Steven sounds a lot like me, very shocking and sad. May need to rethink my stances. This is like interesting developments all over the place. We've got a terrible Zips projection on the screen, maybe the worst that we've ever seen. Steven sounds like Kenwo. There's a lot going on here today, guys.
We know Ken doesn't like to use logic when he spews his garbage out there, so it's not that surprising.
Ron Luce is here. You've got a new name, Sour Steve.
Like Sour Patch Kids. Those aren't bad.
Well, whatever you want to justify it with, be my guest. Can we move to the middle infield? Because there's some names here. I want to hear you pronounce whoever is behind Nicky Lopez and tell me if you've ever heard of this guy before.
Well, it's not just one person. I mean, it's a combination of some of the guys that they got from my barbs. I didn't even look at the rest of those, but this is one of the things Dan loves to do with the Zips projections is he likes to make just a hodgepodge of the names. It is kind of one of the more comical things that he will do with the projections right here. But I mean, I know guys like Brady Shoemaker is in there, and
Romy Gonzalez.
It might be
Romy was TFA'd.
Could be Romy Gonzalez, Jose Rodriguez. Could be in there. My baby boy. And I think Lenine Sosa might be somehow dipped in there. It's interesting. Like you look at some of the guys here, some of the younger players like Jose Rodriguez and Lenine Sosa. They actually have the model has those guys, for 14 and 15 home runs respectively out of the year, but overall offensive production about 25% below league average. So basically they run into the ball and hit it over the fence like once every couple of weeks and then don't really do much else. Fascinating projection here was actually Oscar Colas. Hasn't projected to slug 404 with 19 homers, which I know most fans, based off of what they saw from him a year ago, would look at it and would say, wow, that's, a significant improvement. Well, still has him at about an 85 WRC plus, a 15% below league average. So not great. Really just very much not good. Like I said, it's Luis Robert Jr. and a whole lot of bad.
Yeah, we don't have very much here that you can really ride a lot of hope on. Johnny, our guy Johnny's in the comments. Remember when Dim Zimborski came on our show and spoke a million words but said nothing? So we know how Johnny feels about Zip's projections. But Steven, does this, at least we've talked about the hitting fielding at this point, is this the worst Zips projections that you've seen in White Sox baseball Zips projection history?
Yes. Next question.
Let's move on to the starters and relievers. Because I don't even want to talk about Martin Maldonado and Stassi and Corey Lee. They're
well, I think we'll get to them a little bit later, but not in the way that people are thinking. Look, on the pitching side, you've got Dylan Cease and a bunch of number fives. That's basically where we're at. You look at the rest of this collection of guys here with, Eric Fetty, Christian Mena, Chris Flexen, Davis Martin, who apparently is still alive, coming back from Tommy John surgery, Mike Soroka, Nick Nastrini, Jared Schuster, the two guys that came over from my Barbs. There's not a whole lot here as far as quality. Like I said, it's Dylan Cease and a bunch of number fives, if not worse.
Do you believe that we will see over 11 starting pitchers for this White Sox team this year?
Wow.
I'm just looking at this right now, and if Dylan Cease is traded, Fetty, just based on these projections, is your number one guy. Barring health, I still think there's a chance you could see potentially 11 different starters for this White Sox organization this season, and I don't think that's exactly a good thing.
It in fact is not. I think, man, that's a pretty fair number right there. I feel like if you were calling Vegas, if you were hashtag big better guy, you would have to add a 0.5 onto that for the over under right there. Cause I feel like that's pretty spot on, close to what the number would be.
There's a lot of young guys. There's a lot of new names in here. You've got Garrett Crochet, who's probably going to flip back and forth at some point through this season, pending some health. Tuki Toussaint, he's probably a guy that's going to be utilized back and forth. You saw the White Sox last year sort of shifting around some starts and moving guys back to the bullpen for brief stints to get themselves right. Michael Kopech has never been a pillar of health. I don't know how long you're going to get, Nick Nastrini in this rotation, Soroka, Schuster. These aren't guys that I see throwing 175, 200 in it. None of them, at least based on past history. This could be really ugly.
Oh, I think it's going to be very ugly. You're also forgetting Jesse Schultens.
Ah, yes, Mr. Schultens.
So
Johnny's got a great meme that he does with that on the Sox On Tap Twitter account. Jesse, we need to cook.
He does.
Yeah,
he certainly does. I think maybe the interesting over-under might be, can they get 3.5 starters over 100 innings pitched?
that might be a challenge for them. But I mean, you're the one who has been praising Brian Bannister all off season. So if we don't get to that mark,
hold on.
Are you going to be mad at your boy?
Hold on here. You can't expect Emerald to go into a kitchen that, has low quality food and turn it into a 5-star Michelin rated restaurant overnight. Okay. These things take time. All right. In Bannister, we trust. Okay. And that will be until further notice.
Hey, I'm in Johnny's camp. I just like immediate gratification. I want guys who come here and immediately rake. I want pitchers who come in and,
sounds like you want a new baseball team to support.
I do.
Them.
I don't like this baseball team. I'm just like Chris Getz. I don't like this baseball team, and I like it less after he's assembled it.
Yeah, I mean, I remember being told that he was different, but here we are.
Do we want to talk about this relief corps? Who's our closer?
I mean, Gregory Santos is still, the guy as far as being the closer here. And I think based off of what we saw from him a year ago, I think that makes the most sense. He ran out of gas a little bit kind of towards the end of the year, but up until I would say the last 6 weeks of the season, he was very solid. So, that's something that
after they took his naps away, things started getting a little bit shaky.
I'll tell you a funny story here. So my junior college pitching coach, former major league reliever Tim Burdack, at one point was.
I think we need a theme song for Steve's story time. Keep going.
He was in the Indians organization for a brief period of time, and Lee Smith, who was formerly the all-time saves leader, was with the club around that time. And Burdack made a comment at one point about how, the games in spring training would start, and then Smith would just kind of disappear for a couple of innings at a time, and then he would show up to the bullpen. And Burdick would ask him, like, "Hey, where do you go? What are you doing?" And Lee Smith would kind of say in his, I guess it was kind of like a southern drawl, I'd be like, "Rook, I got to get my nap in."
Hey, naps help. I'm a big proponent of naps, just maybe not in the bullpen. Although if they lead to good pitching results, who's to argue? That really does it for Zips projections, unless you've got a couple.
Mercifully.
Yeah, that was painful. I was not looking forward to that. I'm glad we got through it together. Wanted to touch,
and no one was harmed during the course of those projections there. Amazing.
That we know of. We'll wait for.
Hopefully Ken was harmed.
We'll wait for the numbers afterwards. I wanted to kind of touch on my boy made some comments to the media folk. And these have not really gone over well. We might have to sit down and do a little media training. But this comes courtesy of Nick Morawski, who loves to snip screenshots of news articles and put them out there for White Sox fans to read. Thank you for doing this, Nick. Everybody is counting us out, said White Sox right fielder Gavin Sheets, who was part of a group of players in Chicago last weekend for a Boys and Girls Club of Chicago event Thursday and a season ticket holder event at the Field Museum on Friday. Pretty sure Kenmo was there. Not positive, though, but we'll have to check in with him. And
why would an Astros fan be at a White Sox season ticket holder event?
I'm not sure. The only thing you can do is use that to fuel us. We go out every day trying to play hard and win games, and that doesn't change what we're going to do. We all know we aren't favored to do anything this year. That's the first time since I've been here in the big leagues in 3 years. We can use that to help us and motivate us and see what we can do with it. This got some bad responses to it, and I understand why there's bad responses to it. We just looked at the Zips projections. Kenwo was in the comments confirming that he was not, in fact, in attendance, but he probably will be next year when Sox Fest is back. Steven, any reaction to Gavin Sheets' comments here?
I'd say the most alarming thing about it was that he was identified as White Sox right fielder, Gavin Sheets. I thought we were done with this. I thought we were focusing on defense and not playing guys out of position.
That is an alarming thing, but I'm not sure which outlet this came from. This could have been Tribune. I don't know. We didn't get an actual attribution from Nick Morawski's post here, but I think you're going to see Gavin Sheets in right field. Now, I'd like the White Sox to go out and sign a name like Soler, maybe. I don't know, just somebody who has actually played outfield professionally. Maybe doesn't have to be the best defense, but a bat that's going to be more than potential platoon guy, has more experience in the outfield, maybe a veteran, somebody that's not going to cost a whole too much and break Jerry's bank, but provide you some pop. I'm just throwing out suggestions here, but I think you're going to see, as I said, Eloy Jimenez, Gavin Sheets, and who else did we have on the Zips list?
Oscar Colas.
Getting some reps out there. And if we learned anything about Oscar Colas last year, it's that he's not very good, and there's probably going to be another trip down to AAA Charlotte to get himself right with the Knights, because he did not seem to be Pedro Griffol's favorite option out there in right field.
He most certainly did not.
And in fact, I would say he was probably the most thrown under the bus player of the organization last year.
Yeah, it was kind of fascinating that Colas was really the one guy that was frequently taken to task by Mr. Clean when so many others within the organization were just kind of given a free pass a year ago.
Yes, considering there were veterans that just didn't get the job done. But, I look at these comments and I sort of think to myself, like, this is somewhat solid footing that Gavin has to say these things. Not that he has performed well, but at least he's speaking positively about something. What's he supposed to do? Go out there and say, we're going to fucking suck ass this year? I mean, I
actually would find it kind of funny if a player actually did that at some point.
I would too. Just like I'd like managers to be a little more transparent. I don't know. I feel for Gavin. He came in here and, he really enjoyed that playoff game, and everything just fell apart right after that happened. And, he had a pretty terrible season last year by all accounts, and I'm sure he wants to have a better year this year, but he's not really set up for success with any of this. Right fielder, I mean, it's not the best display of athleticism out there in right field, and we've all seen it, but I just don't know what any of these guys are supposed to say at this point. It's very sad to put him even in this position to talk about what is going to transpire this year. It's like a fighter who is just absolutely undermatched on a card, and you're about to send him into the slaughterhouse. And, I just feel for these guys. I really feel for them.
Yeah, it's always been kind of fascinating to me to see people that actually go to journalism schools and some of the questions that they ask. I just don't get it sometimes. I mean, again,
they're setting them up for the quote so that we can sit here and dissect if Gavin Sheets really thinks that the White Sox are going to, use these projections to fuel them. Now, there are teams out there that are projected to do bad and overachieve it. I don't think anybody looks at this White Sox roster. We're sitting here talking about, are there going to be 11, 12 different starting pitching players on this team this year that get starts because they don't have the horses to win a race. And yet, we're setting Gavin Sheets up for absolute failure by asking him how are you guys going to fare this year? Are you going to beat these projections? Look at what your front office has done.
Yeah, it's not great. Again, I mean, I think, a more reasonable question to ask Gavin in a more realistic line of discussion would be to kind of get a sense from him as far as what things he was improving on or focusing on over the course of the offseason to try to improve during the course of the season to actually make a positive contribution in 2024 when he didn't a year ago. For people that are all about, the gambling and such, and the people that have to screenshot their daily bets on the X machine, I'll say this. I think legalized sports gambling might be one of the worst things to ever happen to this country. But that's not why you called. A lot of the books out there and betting sites have the Sox at like 63.5 wins coming into the season. That's not particularly good. So I think that kind of tells you all you need to know about what kind of season this team is really going to have. It's going to be ugly.
We'll be here to talk about it on the regular. Steve,
fortunately, I'll be drinking again.
Yeah, it's definitely prospect season, as they say. It's time to get hyped about the prospects again. Everybody here in White Sox land loves getting hyped about prospects. You have recently penned a little article about how being
more
patient,
so keyed than penned.
Keyed, penned, same thing. If we weren't having all this technology in our lives, you would have been writing this out on your scroll, and we would get it over to the printing press and we'd have it out there for everybody. But
I probably do it on papyrus.
Papyrus, you're a papyrus guy.
Big papyrus guy. Yeah,
love it. Thank the Lord we've got this nice, beautiful website, ontapsportsnet.com. Makes it really easy. You got your computer, you can type these things up. Patience, you're preaching patience here. Why don't you talk a little bit about your most recent addition to ontapsportsnet.com?
All right. So the MLB Pipeline Top 100 prospect list came out over the weekend here. MLB Network had a big production for it. White Sox had two names on that list. Noah Schultz, left-handed pitcher, at number 50. And the more important one is Colson Montgomery at number 9, the number 2 overall rated prospect in the sport behind Jackson Holliday, who is the sport's top prospect overall. And it's going to be arriving to Baltimore, just further bolstering their club later on this season. Basically, from my perspective here, this team right now, as the farm system stands, has two important players that really matter. Colson Montgomery and Edgar Caro, who was the centerpiece of the acquisition from the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim of Orange County of California of the Pacific time zone last July for Lucas Giolito. These are the two guys that, if they can develop, would potentially be cornerstones of the next fluke playoff team in 2027. And so if Chris Getz really is different, and he talked about being different, and this is something that was directly in his purview as a former director of player development, he should have a full understanding that rushing players to the major leagues before they are ready is detrimental to their growth and to their long-term production and value to this team. Think about some of the names that I cited in my piece. Go back to 2009 with Gordon Beckham. You think about him. You think about guys like Andrew Vaughn. You think about, guys like Carson Fulmer, Carlos Rodon, Garrett Crochet, guys that were forced to the big leagues out of necessity rather out of merit. This team is in a spot right now where the stats in 2024 don't matter. Colson Montgomery could come up and hit 30 home runs, and it will not have any impact on the White Sox position this year. There's not going to be any playoff baseball at the corner of 35th and Shields. I'm going to break some news here live on the air. There's probably not going to be playoff baseball at 35th and Shields in 2025 either.
You might never see playoff baseball again at the corner of 35th and Shields.
I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility here. I'm still saying we get a fluke playoff year in 2027. That's what I'm going with. Nevertheless, at the end of the day, these two guys need to be fully developed. Chris Getz, let them start the year down in Birmingham. You look at Colson Montgomery in particular, he's played like 50-some games in Double-A. That's not enough. And I know there's a lot of people clamoring saying that he's going to get up here this year. If it doesn't happen until mid-August, that's fine. Make him earn his way and hit his way up here. There's questions about his defense, about his ability to stay at the shortstop position. Let him stay down there in the minor leagues and continue to develop. Do not rush this thing. Rushing it serves absolutely no purpose at this point. Same thing with Edgar Carroll. Look, the Angels, they pulled a very classic White Sox move a year ago, having him skip high A entirely and going straight to the Double A Southern League as a 20-year-old. He was one of the youngest players in the league a year ago. And he actually held his own okay. He had, I think on the year, like a 12.5% walk rate, which he's been highlighted for having elite level strike zone management and pitch recognition from both sides of the plate. The power did start to manifest a little bit more once he got to Birmingham after the trade. If that can further develop, and there have been positive reports on his defense improving when he got to the Barons right there, but if that offense can improve, the value of having a switch hitting catcher that gives you above average offense, if he could be a guy that could hit you 20 home runs while playing at least serviceable defense behind the plate, that is insanely valuable. We've seen how hard it has been for this team to address that catching position since A.J. Pierzynski left after the 2012 season. And then you think about Colson Montgomery again, kind of circling back to him right there. If he can find a way to stay in the middle of the diamond, having two core pieces up the middle right there, that is how you build a potentially good baseball team. And if you still have Luis Robert Jr. in there, and you have three guys up the middle, that's how you build a winning baseball team right there. So for all the consternation that has taken place about the moves of this winter so far, Max Stassi, Martin Maldonado, Nicky Naperville, Paul DeYoung, these guys that aren't going to do anything long-term, these guys that are really just here to be filler. They are here, and in my opinion, their purpose is more so just to allow these two guys in particular to stay down in the minor leagues and continue their full development before they get to the corner of 35th and Shields. And who knows, in Carroll's case, that might not even come until 2025, and that's totally fine.
You're preaching a lot of patience here, Steven. Preaching a lot of patience. And I get it. There's really no harm in keeping these guys down as long as you possibly can. My one concern with it is the longer that they're in the White Sox farm system, this is how cynical I've become after being on this show and watching White Sox baseball for years, is how much damage can the White Sox farm system do to these guys? That's what I'm concerned about.
I think that's where you have to hope that Josh Barfield coming in here and making positive changes to the farm system from his time in Arizona. He was a guy that he was at the forefront of helping to build that farm system that the National League champion Arizona Diamondbacks put together right there. So you've got to try that, and you've got to, have a modicum of trust in there that he knows what he's doing, and you have to at least try and see. Again, do we know if it's going to work? We're not going to know for a couple of years here. And
just remember, it was important to bring in Chris Getz to be the GM because it wasn't going to take very long to turn this thing around. And that's why he was the hire.
You know how I feel about that.
Well, I'm just following up, very rational thinking that I think you have here with some of the idiocracy that this team just spews out into the universe and expects people to believe.
Well, this is the life of a White Sox fan in the year of our Lord 2024.
Reading hieroglyphics. We talked a little bit about Edgar Quero, Colson Montgomery. I saw a tweet from Baseball America regarding Noah Schultz, who you briefly touched on as well. And they talked about him being a name to watch and somebody who could become a top pitching prospect in all of baseball. What are your thoughts here, Steve? Because when I hear that, I've seen guys be top pitching prospects. You named a bunch of them as guys who were brought up too early. Is he a guy that you think could potentially be one of those 11, 12 starters this year in a White Sox uniform?
Absolutely.
I would absolutely hope not as well.
No.
Just any thoughts on his development?
I mean, the biggest thing with him is, he needs innings. That's going to be the primary focus for him. When he was down a year ago in Kannapolis, he was very good. And, the scouting reports on him in person were all overwhelmingly positive and talked about just dominant stuff and top of the rotation type stuff. But again, you've got to have the innings in there. He only threw 27 innings a year ago. And this is, on the heels of, being a first round pick in June of 2022. So there's not a whole lot of innings based there. And that's going to be a key for this situation right here. They've got to ramp up those innings. I mean, this is kind of what we've seen with Garrett Crochet in the fact that he just does, and Michael Kopech too. These guys have not thrown enough innings. So, for Noah Schultz, you've got to find a way to get as many innings as you possibly can under your belt this year. I think the idea of him being and spending the entire season in High A Winston-Salem makes the most sense. If you go out there and if you dominate, then hey, 2025, you start the year in Double A Birmingham, and then you're inching closer. But you've got to try to find a way to get. God, I don't even know what the realistic number is going to be here, because he did have some forearm issues towards the end of last year.
I mean, are you okay with 80 to 95 innings?
I think that's probably where the number needs to be at, honestly. I mean, I would like to see it in the triple digits, but I don't know that they're going to get there, honestly. I think that if you go from 27 to, 100, 105, there seems to be a thought process and a belief that that's too big of a jump.
Yeah, it's a large jump. What did you say innings were last year? 27?
27.
Yeah, I would hope for 75 plus. Maybe you scratch that to the 90 inning mark. And some of that is dependent upon pitch count too, Steve, as well too. So it'd be interesting to follow his development. And this is, we're on the heels of sitting here talking about how we don't even want to pay attention to this shit anymore. Just the prospect hype. And yet here we are, prospect season. It feels like it's one of the only things that we have to even look forward to. It's like, here's the table scraps. Be happy.
I mean, I don't know that it's to the level of,
there's not hype, but it's like you almost, as a White Sox fan, have to look at this stuff and say, here's a little bit of hope. Well, that's what I get from your piece a little bit earlier. That we were just talking about. It's like, that is the most positive thing that you've talked about on this whole entire show.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's just a function of baseball fans in general. I mean, I think even, teams when they are in the heart of their contention window are always having to be mindful of the fact that, you need to have that next wave of talent coming. And that's a big part of the reason why this organization is in the spot that they're in right now, because that next wave of talent never came. And that's a big issue that hopefully we see rectified at some point here in our lifetimes.
The ship was lost at sea.
The sea was angry that day, my friends.
Yeah, there we go.
Do we want to
take it over by Pirates?
Do we want to talk about the Sox making a decision and bringing in a new play-by-play voice?
We do want to talk about that, and I think that's the perfect thing to close our show up with. Stephen, this was an off-the-radar name.
It certainly was. I think a lot of people kind of had the idea and had the belief that it was going to be Connor McKnight, just given his work that he has done, previously with the organization, kind of on radio and actually filling in on the TV side of it on occasion here. And then there was, the guy out of Boston that was rumored to be in the mix a little bit right there. But, John Schreifen coming in here and now being the guy taking the chair from Jason Benetti. I don't have a whole lot of feedback that I can give on him at this point here. I did find, one of his quotes to be particularly interesting, where he just talked about the fan base as a whole always wanting and craving information. He talked about the fact that there are so many various White Sox podcasts out there looking at every aspect of the organization, from the major league team to the minor league system here, and always looking for more information. And he talked about that as being a positive and kind of emblematic of a passionate fan base that really does care. And, I think he talked about it in particular. And one of his quotes that was, fascinating was that, even when things are bad, you're a White Sox fan for life.
Yeah, I wonder where he got that from. But hey, I'm a big fan of that. If he's tuning into these shows, I hope we're not.
If you're watching, John Franklin, we'd love to have you on. We'll talk.
We would love to have him on and just discuss some White Sox baseball. I did see that he's got a boxer as well. As you may know, I'm a boxer owner myself, so we've got that account. We can come on here and maybe I'll bring Haas on the show. But other than that,
he's a very good boy.
Yeah, he is. He was having himself a day today. I also saw that he likes food, and there was some interesting things that were said back to him on the whole food topic, because that got our former broadcaster apparently in trouble with the chairman.
Yeah, I mean, so I think now they're just going to have to figure out, well, are we just going to talk about the food, maybe show, videos of it, of fans walking around with it instead of, chowing down on it in the booth.
Steve Stone was not a fan of food in the booth, but
I'm not really sure what Steven Stone exactly is a fan of, other than eating meals and not paying for them.
Well, I mean, I don't know if I've ever seen him take a bite of the food on camera. There were a lot of chewing sounds coming from one microphone in the booth over the past few years, but it definitely wasn't Steve Stone's. I'm excited for this new era just because it's weird to say this. Like, I think my position on White Sox broadcasting, and no one's ever going to compare to Hawk Harrelson, but like, this is sort of fresh. He made some good statements. He directly addressed, as you mentioned, the people who do podcasting and cover this team and all those areas. So I feel like he extended sort of that olive branch out to the people who do care about this thing a lot. Talked about how White Sox fans are White Sox fans for life. I think that is a very true statement, and he's done his homework on this. Listen to a couple of the clips of him calling various different things for ESPN, I believe it was. He sounds like he's going to be able to bring a little bit more in big moments than I think Jason Benetti was able to. And that's not to take away. I know a lot of people were huge fans of Jason Benetti, but we talked about this when Jason left. There was not a lot of, I guess, signature calls when it came to Jason Benetti's repertoire. And I always thought that Benetti sounded a little too national for me in the White Sox booth. I hope that John Schifrin comes in and makes it his own, maybe does a little bit more on the homer side, like realizes who his audience is. And I think he's already done that homework and sort of knows. I'm excited to see what happens. If it's terrible by May, June, July, things could get ugly, but I'm hoping for the best for this guy. I absolutely am.
I am too. And I think to your point right there, he did talk about that, when the moment gets big, that's when he will rise to the occasion, and he will, help bring that to, the people watching at home that aren't in the ballpark here. And, that will be interesting to kind of see and hear. And look, that's always one of the things about.
Do you think we'll get any set the tone drops from him?
If he does, then we know for sure that he is indeed watching the Sox On Tap podcast. We will know that then.
Yeah, that might be a little nugget that we just leave right there, and we'll see.
I mean, who knows? Who knows? Maybe he's even wearing an NWO T-shirt, in the booth at some point here. I mean, that would, kind of be a tip right there. Also,
didn't he broadcast some XFL?
I would have to go back and I would have to look at that. I can't. That is hashtag unconfirmed.
I feel like that's the type of sport that you need to bring, like XFL football. You need to sort of bring the energy. If you can bring that energy over into the White Sox booth, I think we'll get some good moments. It'd be interesting to see how his dynamic plays with Steve Stone. That's not exactly like the easiest person to go in and build that camaraderie with right away. I mean, you're talking about, for better or for worse, somebody who's done baseball primarily as their number one sport, color commentary. I'm also interested to see what happens inevitably when you get Schifrin and Gordon Beckham in the booth together for that, 2-week period when Steve Stone goes back to Arizona or, doesn't go on a road trip. Because we've had those over the past couple of years. It'd be interesting to see what that dynamic is, because I felt like Jason Benetti really lent himself in those situations for a guy like Gordon Beckham. Like, it just seemed like that rapport worked in the booth somewhat cohesively. So I'm interested to see the versatility of Schifrin.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to watch that whole rapport with Steven Stone and any of the substitutes. See how that develops, and again, how he develops his own unique personality. Because for better or worse, the baseball play-by-play man. I mean, that is someone that your legendary ones kind of have their own style, and they have kind of those signature things about them. Bob Uecker, is a guy that nobody can mistake a Bob Uecker call. Vince Scully, same way. Harry Callis when he was with the Phillies. I mean, so you've had a lot of characters, and then look, obviously Hawk. A lot of Hawks catchphrases have become just part of everyday baseball lexicon, despite the fact what some loser fans of that team on the other side of town want to believe. But that's just a fact, and how John Schreifen is able to kind of come and leave his own stamp on things on the broadcast. It is going to be fascinating to see, because that was one thing that Jason didn't really have.
You're talking those iconic calls.
Yeah. And even just a signature home run call. Even
I mean, let's be real. The more memorable White Sox broadcaster over that course of Benetti's tenure, the most memorable broadcaster is still Bill Walton.
And that was maybe one of the most painful, games I've listened to in a long time. I know a lot of people thought that was fun. You can keep it. I mean, I don't need.
I had a blast with it.
I don't need Bill Walton trying to talk about baseball while he's stoned out of his mind.
It was fantastic, but to each their own.
Yeah,
it should be an intriguing season in that regard, because we'll have that at least to sort of decipher and figure out, and there's going to be some newness to it. I still didn't like the comments from Benetti that came out just a couple of days ago. Did you see those?
I did. I assume you're talking about the comments that he made with, former Purdue Boilermaker, the best basketball program in the B1G.
I'm sure you,
Robbie Hummel.
I wanted to let you go off on this.
Basically saying that, it's you have a guy that has his dream job and leaves for a division rival, and basically kind of a little bit of a backhand slap at I'm gonna assume probably Brooks Boyer. Well,
they came out and said that wasn't even, don't go getting mad at Brooks Boyer. That was Benetti about like a month ago, and then you get these comments the next time he's on air, and
all I've got to say is Hawk was right.
Hawk was right. Hawk's right about a lot of things. Steven, I think that about does it for today's edition of the Sox On Tap podcast. We're in the best shape of our lives over here. It's been fun as always. You got any final thoughts before we head on out into the sunset?
We are 2 weeks away from pitchers and catchers. We're going to be seeing guys throwing bullpens on mounds in Arizona in short order. And
the snap of the glove, the tossing of the ball, the little highlights that we get on Twitter, and
pitchers running poles.
Yeah. It's a beautiful time of year.
Maybe throwing a little PFP too.
Ooh, yeah. There you go. Your guy, Brian Bannister, will be out there.
In Bannister we trust.
Ethan Katz. You'll see him out there with his clipboard, writing some things down. You might get a clip of Martin Maldonado talking about how great Michael Kopech is, how crisp his fastball looks. It's exciting times. Very exciting times.
And
Steve?
we're here for it.
Yes, we are. We are here for it. We'll be back fairly soon, probably next week. Again, talking about more White Sox baseball. Until then, you can follow the show at Sox On Tap. Follow Steven at NWI_Steve, myself at Tony On Tap. Subscribe to the YouTube, youtube.com/OnTapSportsNet. Make sure you're checking out OnTapSportsNet.com for all your White Sox news, updates, rumors, and Steve's musings. Until next time, White Sox forever.
White Sox for life.